Okay, so let's start part two of our look at the AutoCAD user interface, the front page or the drawing environment, whatever you want to call it. In part one, we mainly focused on the top area here, the panel and the ribbons, panels and ribbons, and the application menu and the quick access toolbar, and then these drawing tabs up here, the start tab and drawing one, some stuff up here with help and things like that. Now we're going to focus on the middle and lower sections. So first of all, this big area right here, this is our drawing environment. This is where you're going to be doing your drawings. Keep in mind that we're still in model space, which is where we're going to focus for the first quarter or third of the class, being in model space. Okay, so so this is where your drawing is going to be done. This space, consider this space infinite. You know, it's probably limited by the computer capabilities or whatever, but for all intents and purposes, it's limited. It's limitless. So the size of the things that we can draw are as big or as small as you want. So we can draw a battleship, we can draw, watch movements, anything, any in between. Remember I talked earlier in the last video about AutoCAD being unitless. AutoCAD doesn't deal in units until you print. And then we have to convert the drawing size to paper units. That is 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 17 or whatever it is in millimeters. Okay, so that means that this area right here, we always want to draw without scaling. So if we're drawing a battleship, we want to draw it with battleship dimensions. If we're drawing a nano machine, we want to draw it with very small measurements in here. And then we zoom in or zoom out to show us the detail that we need in this environment. Okay, so that's the drawing environment. There's a couple of things in the drawing environment that I'm going to tell you right now that we should just ignore because they're for three-dimensional drawing, and this class is strictly going to be two-dimensional drawing. Okay, two-dimensional drafting with AutoCAD. So in the top right-hand corner, right here, that viewport control button, the view controls area, and then the visual style controls. This is all for three-dimensional drawing. That is when we're drawing in three-dimensional space with solid models or surface models or whatever you have it. So this area right here, we want to ignore that. We're not going to do anything with it. It's not going to do anything for us in 2D, so we can just ignore that area right there. Likewise, over here, this area is called the Viewcube, and this is also a tool for three-dimensional viewing, that is viewing in three-dimensional space. We're going to ignore that as well. All right, there's nothing for us here. Now, in fact, maybe later on I'll show you how to turn this off because you might not want to see it. You might feel that it gets in the way, but for right now we're just going to ignore it. This area right down here, this is called the nav bar, okay? And the nav bar is also an area that, for the most part, we can ignore, okay? Now, there are commands on here that are useful in a two-dimensional world, namely the zoom commands right here and the pan command, but I'll show you how to do that without accessing this. And so, we don't really need this up here. Everything else is for a three-dimensional drawing environment, okay? So that's our drawing environment, a few areas here that we can just straight up ignore. Let's look down in the bottom left-hand corner. So the bottom left-hand corner is where we see what's called the UCS icon, okay? The UCS icon shows us the positive X and positive Y directions on the screen. So AutoCAD is a Cartesian drawing environment. That means it uses X, Y, and Z coordinates to draw. we don't, strictly speaking, we don't draw typing in coordinates. We use another method or other methods. So, we'll go through all that. But as far as what this can be used for, I like to use it as a reminder, especially if you're starting to learn AutoCAD. It's just a helpful tool to remember that X is positive going to the right and Y is positive going up. Okay, X is negative to the left and Y is negative down. All right. The only other thing I want to mention here is that this, which in math we might call the origin, the intersection of the X and Y axes, this is not really the origin in AutoCAD. The origin is kind of off the screen right here. So this is not, strictly speaking, where 0, 0 is. Okay, but we'll talk about all that, and we're not really going to draw using coordinate entry, although we can. It's not really practical for much of the drawing that we're going to be doing or that you do in industry. All right, finishing up with the drawing environment, of course, we have the area right here, which is called the command line. So this is where commands that we execute, or where communication between AutoCAD and you, the user, the drawer, are going to take place. Okay, when AutoCAD's communicating with you, it will do so through the command line. Now, there's other ways that AutoCAD will communicate with you, and the way that we're going to kind of focus on is with dynamic entry, but it's still useful to have and to see the command line here. We can do a couple things with it. And I'm not saying that you need to do this right now or that you want to do this, but the command line is expandable, right? So you can see more than one line in the command line. So that's kind of the history of the commands. We can move it around. So if you see this little window right here, this taskbar thing, if I move the cursor over to this row of dots, this double row of dots, and click with the left mouse button, I can move it around. So if for some strange reason I want the command line in the middle or at the top, then I can move it like right there. I kind of want it down here. Notice that it kind of jumps in. If I move it down here, I'm not sure whether you'll notice it, but it kind of jumps down in there. So this is what they call docked, D-O-C-K-E-D, docked. And so I just dock the command line. And of course we can close it. We can make it go away. I usually keep this closed because I don't use it that much. I'll show you there's other ways that we can use it, and so you might want to close it. If you do close it, right, there's always the question of how to get it back. So we get it back by holding Control down and hitting the 9 button. So I'll show you. We say yes, and then I hold Control and Control 9, and then there it comes back again. Okay. Last couple areas that we're going to talk about here, and then we'll be finished with part 2. On the left-hand side down at the bottom, I've already talked about this in part 1, but let me just reiterate this. We have the access to the 2 spaces that we use in AutoCAD. So the first space is called Model Space, and you can see that tab here, and that's where we do our drawing. Model Space is for drawing. It's for creating your geometry, any kind of center lines, hidden lines, anything like that. And then the other space that we have with AutoCAD is called Paper Space. And with Paper Space, there could be a number of different layouts. Okay, so each one of these layouts is Paper Space. All right, so layout 1, layout 2, which you can see is the same. Layout 1 and layout 2 are identical in this case. Those are what we call Paper Space. All right, and Paper Space is for getting your drawing set up to print. So this is supposed to model or simulate or show you what the page would look like. All right, the hidden lines here are meant to indicate the printing extents, right? So remember, we can't print to the edges of the paper because the printers don't work out there. So the hidden line is kind of showing you don't let your drawing go beyond the hidden line or else it won't print. This is a viewport window. We're going to get into all this stuff later. So I don't, this is where I kind of want to pull back. We don't need to get into this. We're not going to be using the layouts initially for the first few drawings. So the only thing I want to do is just, tell you about them, show you where they are and what they're used for, and then we'll go much more in depth later on when we start to use these. So right now we're just going to stick with model space. All right. And then finally, across the bottom of this, on the right-hand side, is a very, very important area. This area is called the status bar, and it basically shows you all the currently active modes and properties of your drawing environment. Okay, where you can turn things on and off. Now, the problem with the status bar is that these symbols sometimes are hard, especially for new users, to understand. I'll tell you the truth, even I forget what some of these, or don't know right off the top of my head what some of these symbols represent. So again, remember, just like we have here with tooltips, down here, if we hover over this, it will show us the same thing. So this is for displaying the grid. This is for turning snap on and off. This is the ortho mode, what we call ortho mode or ortho. Polar tracking, so on and so forth. Now there's some things in here that we're going to talk about initially. There's some things in here we'll talk about later on. There's some areas in here we kind of don't want to mess with because it'll, if you accidentally click on one of these, turn it on or turn it off, then, it's kind of a problem to figure out what happened and how to get it back on again. This in the far right hand side, this is our customization menu, and this is where we can turn on and off our different status bar areas. So notice that we have checks. So the checks tell us what is being shown in our status bar. So model space is being shown, and it's right here. We have grid mode, and it's being shown right there. Snap mode is being shown. So this is just allowing us to display different areas on our status bar. Okay, and I'll just click off to make that go away. So again, we'll talk about all this stuff in much more detail later on as we're going through the different drawing projects. But for right now, that's going to be our AutoCAD user interface and in all its glorious details. All right, thanks. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.